What's up? This is Anthony Davis. I'd like to explain the difference between active range of motion and passive range of motion, and also how that's different than having active muscles or passive muscles. So I talk a lot about active range of motion, passive range of motion. The reason being because if you are exploring in your movement practice or yoga practice or fitness practice, active range of motion, it means that you are fully in control of your own joints as they move. And that's a great, very, well, it's controlled. So you're going to be safer, stronger, more coordinated, better balance. All of the good things are associated with active range of motion. What active range of motion means is that the muscles that surround the joint that's moving are actually responsible for the movement of that joint. So if I want to move my hip joint, I can lift my leg using the strength of my hip. But I could also grab a strap, for example, and I could put this on my foot and loop it around my foot. And then I could pull with my hands. I could use the strength of my hands. And I could pull on this strap and lift my leg using my hand. I'm pulling on this strap, right? I'm using no strength in my leg. That would be passive range of motion, right? I'm using an external force to move my hip joint. Now, I could also be using muscles in my leg and yet be in a passive range of motion. Okay? Because I could use gravity, right? So I can resist gravity, for example, in pigeon pose. Actually, let's just talk about the hip joint, right? So I don't need to do the same pose. I know I did this figure 4 a moment ago, but bear with me here. I can move the hip joint, right? So if this is neutral, and then I step into this preparation for pyramid pose, Parsvottanasana, if I fold forward at the hip, if I move myself down towards the floor, the force that's allowing that movement is gravity, right? Gravity is pulling me towards the floor. So because I have that additional force, I can be pulled by gravity further than I could actually control myself. Now, if you know a little bit about fitness, you might be aware of the fact that, well, actually you're eccentrically contracting. So you're still using your muscles. You're just lowering yourself down. That's true. But I can go further with gravity than without the gravity, right? So that's obviously true, right? So with gravity, I can pull myself down and I can touch my head to my knee. I can get my chest on my thigh, right? So I can get all the way down there and, get my hands on the floor, right? That's because gravity is pulling me down. And when I get towards the end range of motion, I actually use my belly and my leg to literally pull me deeper. Okay, so that's not the same as since I have gravity on my side, I can pull myself deeper. Whereas if I tried to stand up and do the same thing, if I tried to lift my left leg into the same pose, I was just in this pose right here, and I touched my head to my knee and I touched my chest to my thigh. Well, if I stand up and I try and lift my left leg, let's see how high I should be able to get my thigh to my chest, and I should be able to get my head to my knee. So let's see. Oh, that's it. That's all I can do. I can get it to 90 degrees. Now I'll add the spinal flexion. So I'll really try and touch my head to my knee. Let's see if I can get a little closer if I use my spine as well. Because in fairness, in the pyramid, I am bending my spine, so that it's not a fair comparison. So let's bend my spine. Let's see how close I can get. That's it. So I'm like a good foot away. So I've got all of this range of motion right here that I'm not in control of. So there's this huge gap between my active controlled range of motion versus my passive range of motion. So in triangle pose, A way to think about this too is so that what I just demonstrated was using the hip flexors and the muscles on the top of my leg to lift myself up. There's another way to get into the same position though, actively, and that's an eccentric contraction. Well, in triangle pose, the muscles that are actually working are my inner thigh muscles, my leg muscles, spinal muscles, etc. So triangle pose, I know I just did pyramid pose, but we're going to do triangle for a moment because then I can face the camera. So the inner thigh muscles would work in triangle pose, right? And so you might think, well, I'm active in the pose. So why are you calling this passive stretching? Like why are we calling this passive stretching? Because you're using passive range of motion. You're using the addition of gravity to pull you deeper. So I can go down and I can touch my hand to the floor, right? I can get it down there, right? So there's this huge range of motion that I'm capable of, but it's because I'm using gravity to pull me down, right? Now, in order to control that range of motion, I should be able to come out of the range of motion with full control. So a little test you can do, if you have these sliders available, or if you have an ice rink available, or you could just get socks, put on some socks and get on a hardwood floor, and you can test this out for yourself. In order to get into triangle pose, so these sliders just slide around as though I was wearing socks. And these sliders, they'll slide out. So in triangle pose, yoga teachers will usually cue some kind of isometric contraction. What they'll say is, draw your feet energetically towards each other, as though if you were on a sheet of ice, your feet wouldn't slip out from underneath you. Or you might say, if you're on a sheet of ice, imagine that you could actually pull, you're so strong that you could pull your feet towards each other, right? So there are a lot of poses like that. And so you might think, I'm firing up my legs in this pose. I'm super active. So what's wrong with that? Well, just because you're active doesn't mean you're actually in control of your positioning. It doesn't mean you're in control of the pose. So we can test this and see if I can control the pose. Okay, let's see where I can control the pose. If I take it from neutral pose, and then I turn my foot out as though I'm going into triangle pose. And then I slide my left foot a little bit closer to triangle. I should be able, with my weight centered over my 2 feet, I should be able to slide my feet together. I should be strong enough to do that. So let's see. Am I? Yes, I am. Okay, let's slide it a little bit further. Let's go like 2 feet away. Now, weight evenly distributed, I should be able to slide my feet together. Let's see. Yes, I can. Although it was hard. My inner thighs had to work really hard. Let's try a little bit further, because that wasn't even close to triangle pose. Okay, now I'm starting to feel it. In order to stay here and not have my feet slip out from underneath me, I actually have to use the strength of my inner thighs just to hold here. So now I want to know, am I in control of this pose? And in order to know if I can control it, I should be able to pull myself back to center using the strength of my inner thighs. Can I do it? Let's find out. Come on. The only way I can do it, barely, was by shifting my weight onto one leg so that I lightened the load on the other one, and then I could slide it. But even then it was barely, and I cheated. I cheated to do it. So in order to get to actual triangle pose, where my, like classically my feet would be this far apart, there's no way. I'm not going to try because it would actually really hurt my muscles to do that. But I should be able to get all the way out here and then slide my feet all the way together, right? So if I go by this logic, then my triangle pose, the last distance that I could really control, was only a couple feet away. So really, I would want to take a short stance for triangle pose. And then the other test, which was how high can I get my leg here, it was a little bit less than 90 degrees. So I would want a short stance here, and then I would want to only, tilt a little bit. I really don't want to tilt very much, right? That might be my triangle pose. Now, this might seem really restrictive to you, and it is. And you don't have to follow it 100% to a T, right? This is to reveal to you that what you're doing in your yoga practice probably versus what you can actually control, your own strength. If we want to be balanced and have kind of equal strength and flexibility, then this will reveal to you that you are most likely much more flexible than you are strong. Right? Even super strong people probably, well, everybody has more passive range of motion than active range of motion. But the gap, we don't want to have a huge gap. You don't want to be able to, easily grab your foot and sling it behind your head, right? That would be a huge passive range of motion. But then if you try to pick up your foot with your own strength, you can only get to here, right? And that's me. I can put my foot behind my head, but when I pick it up, I can only get here. That means from here to back here, all the way up here is all passive range of motion that I cannot control. And that's not a situation I want to be in. I don't want to have my joint be controlled by gravity and torque and potential energy and leverage and forces of physics that don't care about my joint. Yeah, I want to control my own joint with the muscles that actually surround that joint. So if you're applying this to your movement practice, your yoga practice, the takeaway is this. Look, it's okay to, be in a passive range of motion. It's okay once in a while to be a little bit further than what your active range is. If you did this test in some pose, pick a pose, whatever it is, if you did this little sort of test and you tried to find out, well, what is my active range? And you discover that in order to do a pose, you have to go a little bit outside that, it's not a big deal. You'll be fine. It's not a big deal. But when you look at yoga and you look at Ashtanga yoga and Iyengar yoga and Shivananda and Kripalu and any Bikram and any yoga system that involves a lot of postures, almost all of it, almost every single pose in the primary series of Ashtanga yoga, if not every single pose, except for Shavasana, basically every single pose involves a range of motion that is significantly beyond anybody's functional ability or active range, right? So if a pose in yoga, let's just say that a pose that a pose required me to do the splits, which there are a couple poses, Samakonasana, equal angle pose, right? That's where you sit on the ground and your feet go straight out into the splits. Or, anyway, so let's say that you wanted to get into a pose like doing the splits and you wanted to be actively in control. Well, you would have to be able to slide your feet out to the sides, to the sides, to the sides, to the sides, to the sides. You'd have to be able to keep going all the way until your bum hit the floor. Right? So you'd keep no hands though. You'd have to keep sliding the feet way out. Okay. All the way out into the splits with no hands. And then when you got all the way out there, you'd have to be so strong in your inner thighs, no hands, that you could pull your feet together. Whoa, all the way back up to standing. If you could do that, you'd be a superhero, right? I seriously doubt that anybody can do that. But if you can do that, frankly, I probably have no business telling you that you can't or shouldn't or are at risk if you're doing the splits, because you have so much control over that position. You own it, But most of us mere mortals can't do that. It's basically impossible to do that. So when you're doing your yoga, it's not that you can't do a little bit of passive range of motion once in a while. It's like, man, we look at these yoga systems that involve yoga poses. Yin yoga is another huge culprit of this, where you're moving intentionally into your passive range of motion. They talk about finding your edge, and you sit at your edge, and then you'll relax a little deeper, and then you relax at your edge, and then you go a little deeper, and you hold that pose for 5, 15, 10, minutes. It's crazy. So you're pushing your passive range of motion. When are we training our active range of motion? When are we training just this, right? Just holding the leg there, right? Even in Ashtanga Yoga, right? We have a perfect opportunity to do this. We have a perfect opportunity to train this in Utthita Hasta Padangusthasana. But instead, in Ashtanga, you grab the freaking toe and you push it out. So now you're in passive range of motion instead of active range of motion, right? Now, they do technically, at the end of that series, they put the foot forward and hold. That's the only good one of 4 poses in a row, right? You had 4 opportunities to just really strengthen your legs and your active range of motion. So in summary, just to review the terms, active range of motion, you can control with the local joint, the muscles around your actual moving joint. Passive range of motion is some outside force like gravity or a strap or some other person is actually moving your body for you like a teacher. Or I said gravity, so because that's a big one in yoga is gravity pulls us down. Or you use your own hands to move your limb. So that's passive range of motion. You can have active muscles that are working hard, and yet you can be beyond your active range of motion. So you can be doing a pose that requires passive range of motion, even though you're active, right? So you can be in a place that you're not in control of, even though your muscles are technically firing. So I want to clear up that confusion. And then of course, passive muscles are when your muscles aren't working. And that's a whole nother discussion about why stretching with passive muscles is not really useful. The short version of that is your brain should be controlling your muscles' movement. Your brain should be in control of when your muscles get long and when your muscles get short. And if you're telling your muscles to just totally relax and chill while you stretch them out, and there's no there's no conscious control over your muscles while they get longer, the benefits are like very, very low. Yeah. The drawbacks start to get higher. So the trade-off, in my opinion, isn't worth it for passive stretching. So you can think about any yoga pose and you can start to reimagine how can I make triangle pose accessible then? Because triangle pose is so common. So how can I take a pose that's like, okay, you're supposed to touch the floor in the classical version, but that requires way more range of motion than most people can control. Well, what if you did this? What if you reached over your head? So you add a little weight, right? This is resistance, or you could clasp your hands behind your head and you take a little bit narrower stance. So not such a wide stance. And then, you take a breath in and you just exhale and kind of lean to the side, just a little bit. Now I've got some weight in this front leg, right? A little bit of weight. I'm feeling that. Okay. I got a nice long spine, nice neutral spine. And then I come back up. Can I do that? Oh, I can do that just fine. Okay. I breathe in and then I move a little bit further, like just tilt, just a little tilt, hold there, kind of feel my inner thighs working, get this nice neutral spine, hang out, breathe a little bit. Okay. Come back. Right. And then if you can go a little bit further and come back, you're good, right? But don't start creeping down towards the floor, because if the floor is your goal, then what comes after that? Well, then binding is going to be your goal. Oh, now I can bind, right? And then what's after that? I can bind and then I can stand up and do birds of paradise. Okay, what's after that? Oh, I can put my foot behind my head. What's after that? I can put 2 feet behind my head. What's after that? You can keep going. You can start, the sky is the limit there. And then you're in this like wonderland of dysfunctionality in the body, and it's totally stupid. So instead, if we start to reorient our goals, and if we have to choose in a pose of like, oh, I want a deep stretch, or I want to be actively in control of my muscles and train my brain to control my muscles in a positive, coordinated sort of fashion. Yeah, try to go in that direction. You don't have to completely rewrite your yoga practice. Although I modify every single pose as far as what's classically taught in like Ashtanga and Iyengar. I modify every single pose heavily when I teach. So that's what I do. But you don't have to do that. You can make simple modifications to the yoga practice in general and just start to steer that boat towards a place where you're more in control, you know? So that's a better direction to head, right? It's just more useful to be in control of your own joints. Again, I'm not saying you can't enjoy a little stretch once in a while if you want to. It's not a big deal. If you stretch a little bit once in a while, if it makes you feel good, it's not going to be bad for you at all. That's fine. But if you stretch every single morning, and you have to stretch before your day, and you have to stretch before class, and you have to stretch before you go for a run, and you have to stretch before you go for a hike or a swim, or you go play with your dog, or whatever. If you're always stretching, then not only are you forming an addiction to stretching, you're making your muscles weaker, you're training your muscles not to be working in coordination with your brain. I can go on, but the point is that it's like, that's not the direction you want to go. That's not a useful direction to aim for as a goal, right? So at the end of the day, we got to pick a direction. Do we want to go to the flexibility train, or do we want to go to the strength and coordination train, right? And you can go for this like functional training train, and still have all these benefits. You can still practice if you want to get this passive stuff, if you want to get this nice juicy relaxation that you get in a deep stretch. There are a lot of ways that you can get a nice relaxing practice without having to make your joints unstable and be hyperflexible and all that stuff, right? You can do myofascial release. You can do breathing techniques. You can do yoga nidra. You can do restorative yoga instead of yin, where you're fully supported, right? There are all sorts of things that you can do. A hot shower, a hot bath, sauna, cold shower, actually, believe it or not, right? Lots of other options that you can do. So I hope that clears up any confusion about passive and active range of motion. I hope that it inspires you to positively change your yoga practice, because I'm not trying to take away from your practice. If flexibility means a lot to you and you've gained a lot from your very flexible yoga practice, and if you're like hypermobile, I'm not trying to say that there's anything wrong with you. I'm just trying to say that it's not wise to be trying to become hyper flexible with lots and lots of passive stretching. That's a stupid idea. Period. End of discussion. Full stop. Right? Okay? So I want you to be empowered to go do positive things, learn more about the human body, be strong and in control, and like keep moving and be active, because the benefits of just active movement and getting your heart rate up and moving dynamically and all of these things are so good for your body, your fascia, your heart, your immune system, your endocrine system, your nervous system, your existential well-being as well. So we got to be doing something. I don't want to always be a negative train, but the hyperflexibility really has to go from yoga. It's not useful. It's not serving us. It's holding us back. It's dragging us down, and we can do so much better. So keep trying to evolve that practice. I hope this is useful. If you can do the splits, by the way, if you can do that, if you can get the splits and you can pull yourself back, or if you can put your foot behind your head with no hands and without whipping it behind your head, if you can do those things, please tag me in a video of you doing that, because I've never seen anybody do that. And I would be absolutely amazed. Oh my God, you're amazing. That's so cool. I'd love to see that. Just side note. So anyway, okay, that's enough for now. Peace.